Hello, I'm Don Loach, and have had a close connection with the Oratory Society throughout its 50 years. I came to the university to teach music history and theory and direct the Glee Club. When I came to the university in 1964, I found a choral organization, a chamber chorus called the University Singers, that had been formed in the 1950s, and it was continuing on and thriving. And a new organist had arrived at St. Paul's Memorial Church on the corner, by the name of Charles Bradley, and he became director of the University Singers in 1966.
There were no choruses at that time for women in the community. And so we joined the University Singers until the women came the next year, and then they didn't need us. So we were without a chorus.
What I remember very vividly is the true excitement that there was at St. Paul's when we knew that this marvelous young conductor was coming to St. Paul's. And that was really, in many people's minds, bringing a new era into music. There was always music at the university, but that was, in a sense, peripheral to the community.
Chuck came to me one Sunday morning and said, Ben Sturgill and Eleanor and I have been talking about a chorus. Would you be interested? And I, of course, said yes. And that's how we actually got started.
And so together, that year, 66, 67, that group of enthusiastic singers from the University Singers also met to form what became known as the Oratory Society of Charlottesville, Albemarle.
I had the joy of singing in its first concert and sang for many, many years. I also served on the board. It was such a wonderful group of people, and everyone was so enthusiastic and worked so hard.
Been a choral singer all my life, and look for choruses to join. And I first heard about Oratory Society at St. Paul's Memorial Church when our choir director, Chuck Bradley, I realized he was helping to get it started, and this sounded exciting.
And we really had to work from scratch. We didn't have much money, and coming by it was difficult. We were willing to do anything. They had a fair in the fall at Barracks Road, and you had a little booth, and of course we didn't have a booth, and you had to pay $25, I think it was, in order to have a booth. And we sold hot dogs, which we cooked on a little stove. And we were so excited when finally we had enough money to build a booth all of our own. And so it was stored in a member's barn. And we discovered the next year when we got ready to use it that her husband had cut it up for firewood. We were so distressed.
The first concert was the Messiah at Albemarle High School. And we had mentioned in the community that we were going to do this, and we were going to do it on a Sunday night. And they said, no, everyone goes to church on Sunday night. And so we were going to charge $10 a ticket. They said, no, you'll never make $10 a ticket. Well, we had a full house. It snowed.
So it was my duty to get the plows out. And I had to make sure the plows came and came back in time to clear the parking area at Albemarle High School.
And the orchestra, the portion that came from Richmond did attempt to walk out.
We didn't realize that they were union, and when they had played their specified amount of time, that was it. We were rehearsing busily away with the Messiah when they left, and they never came back. So parts of it were literally unrehearsed for our first performance. But
Chuck was panicked, and I must say I was too, but one of the violinists got back together and we finished the concert.
But it went well. But that was why Jenny Johns decided we needed to do something different in the way of an orchestra. And it was such a wonderful thing she discovered that we could actually bring players from Juilliard School in New York down to Charlottesville. We did it for many years.
Jenny Johns had seen to it that we had a good orchestra. For the Messiah performance of '68, the orchestra came from Richmond, and that didn't seem to be entirely satisfactory, but she saw to it, she discovered that the Juilliard Orchestra was available to make trips outside of New York City.
I was in New York for a meeting before Christmas, and I thought, well, I'll just walk over to Juilliard and see what Mr. Smith has to say, and he thought it was a great idea that they could come. We hired the bus. They came, arrived about 2 a.m. and at my house, and then all the parents that were keeping them came over and picked up their student.
And the whole community got involved in that. We had a special dinner for them. They would come on Friday night, and we would begin rehearsals on Saturday morning, which would go on all day long. And then we would have a dinner for them and for the orchestra, and lots of people in the community assisted with that. It was lots of fun.
We paid them $100 per performance, and that seemed to be plus dinner and lodging, and they seemed to be very happy with that and liked the small town appearance.
My memories go back very much to the time when we had the wonderful Juilliard students coming, and it was very nice because most of us had children of our own who were involved in music, and these young people loved giving little hints and listening, obviously, to children who were at much different level from them. It was a fun time, and it was a very, very exciting time.
When we brought in Juilliard, it was quite an eye-opener because they loved it. They would, they tried to all be in the bus to come down and have a way to play, and we not only housed them, made sure they were housed, and we fed them everything. They had really no expenses while they were here. So every year they all wanted to come back. And then finally we were able to raise a good program of players from the university, which worked well. It took a while to get that together.
Charles Bradley had started off well with good performances of a number of important pieces. He had done the Bach St. John Passion, and he had done some other pieces, including the Brahms Requiem.
The St. John Passion stands out in my mind because we had the Juilliard kids, and it was a full performance, and it's a wonderful piece. We did it later on, as I remember, but that first performance stands out in my mind.
We recorded St. John's Passion, was it? And I had that on tape, and it burned in a fire that we had. So I no longer have that. I was so sad about that.
Chuck was extraordinary. He had an amazing amount of knowledge and also energy.
Jenny said he was a taskmaster, which he was, but it was good therapy for us. We'd go to rehearsal and we'd work like heck when we, and it was good. I loved that. He was a fine person, and then we had people who helped with rehearsals, came and played the piano and so forth. and helped him out in that respect. The more we got to really going before the community, the more they realized it was a valuable asset. Nobody really knew what to think of us at first. I think Chuck had this wonderful idea about what he was going to produce, and he did it.
Charles Bradley was called to become organist and choir director at the cathedral in Spokane, Washington. And it was at that time then that they asked me to take over as director of the Oratory Society. All of this time, of course, I was on a full-time professor in the music department and directing the glee club, men's glee club, directing the university singers by that time, and also teaching courses in music history and theory. So the Oratory Society was something that I took on extracurricularly, you might say. But that was perfectly satisfactory. We soon realized that performances in Albemarle High School were not an appropriate venue for our performances. It was a kind of mixture of auditorium and gymnasium, I think. And so there was the chorus on this stage, but there was the orchestra on the floor of the gym, but we managed. But we soon realized that we would be best served if we could find a better venue. And although we had no connection with the university, we hoped to make some kind of connection so that we could move into Cabell Hall Auditorium. We were certainly there by 1975, and we may have been there even earlier. There were 2 years in there in which I was not the director. I had a sabbatical, so I was not directing in 1973 through 75. And Dingwall Fleary was director at that time, and I don't know whether they were in Cabell Hall or still in the high school. But I do know that I was involved in performances in Cabell Hall for the performances that I did beginning in 1975. I had come from Berkeley, where I knew a member of the composition faculty at the University of California at Berkeley, and so performed a piece by him at that concert, which may have been our first in Cabell Hall Auditorium.
I came to Charlottesville in 1975, and in the autumn of that year, I wanted to sing with a good chorus, one that was doing good music at good level and wanted to work with good singers. So I learned about the Oratorio Society and that they were having auditions for singers.
We had regular auditions every year, and the group, I would say, was transforming gradually from its original group of singers from the University Singers of the decade before.
At the time that I started singing with the group Don Loach was conducting, I wanted to sing with a group like this in order to get experience with major choral works and all, and to get additional experience. And certainly this group promised to do that and fulfilled it very well. Don, of course, as you all know, is dedicated to good performance of great works, always has been.
I too did the Bach St. John Passion very soon after that, and that's a major challenge. And there were a number of other challenges that took place, doing the Brahms Requiem, for example.
I was not in the initial group, but I was happy to join a little later on. A latecomer, but a happy member. So I sang with it for quite a few years. I put in my one little voice and am part of a much larger whole, and that's very fulfilling and gratifying. And almost becoming part of the music when when I know it and I'm singing it, I'm transported somewhere.
I have a few comments about performances that I recall in those days. One interesting event was the connection with the Bach performance of the Passion of St. John. I had asked a friend of mine who was a harpsichordist at Yale that I had known when I was there, Albert Fuller, and I had asked him to please come to Charlottesville and play the harpsichord continuo for that performance of the St. John. And it turned out that at the end he could not come, but he sent one of his students. He was then at that time teaching at Juilliard. And so the student came to be the harpsichordist. Well, he was a young man and he was quite nervous. And so the interesting thing was that just before I gave the downbeat for the St. John Passion, he started to play. And so there was a mad scramble with all the strings who were supposed to be playing at the same time suddenly had to jump in and start playing, and I had to start conducting. So in a sense, the start of that performance was in the hands of this young, inexperienced harpsichordist who could play the instrument very well, but he certainly didn't want to wait for the downbeat. One has to do with a performance I did of the Bach's B Minor Masse. It requires, in a number of the movements, important trumpet parts. And the last movement, the Dona Nobis Pacem, there is a trumpet part which soars high, and it seems to come out of nowhere toward the end and towers over everything. And we had a trumpet player who came over from JMU who performed, was in the orchestra at that time. And his playing was so beautiful that it raised the whole level of the moment and the final moments of the performance to a wonderful, glorious level. And I remember that so well.
One work that was really kind of broadening or eye-opening for me, because it was the first time I'd ever done it, was Bach's B Minor Masse. That was just a revelation, of these columns of sound that are created in the many of the movements and pieces in that work. And I thought it was just a glorious thing to sing, to learn and to sing, and have thought so ever since.
We brought our soloists in from outside. We did not depend upon local talent. So many of them, some of them came from Washington, but they came from afar. And one of these was a soprano that auditioned, and we brought from from Seattle. And she was essentially a Wagnerian soprano. And it was a glorious voice. And when she opened her mouth at that performance of the Dvorak, when she had her moment and began singing, I thought to myself, Charlottesville has never heard a voice like that. It just filled the room.
Don, at the period when I started singing with the group, had a local reputation for being very exacting with what he wanted from his singers and what kind of sound he wanted. I tried to produce as well as I could and to take it and learn from what I heard.
Well, my last season with the Oratory at that time, I did the Haydn Seasons in 1982. And then I became chairman. I was appointed chairman of the music department and felt that I could not take on that responsibility and oratorio and singers and glee club and my teaching and do all of those things at the same time. And so at that time then the board connected up with Judy Gary and with Paul Hill. She had been a graduate student of mine at the university. She had done her master's degree under and I was her tutor for her thesis and so on. So we had a close association. And then, as I said, she did a good job for Paul Hill. She then was really named the music director, and he was the guest conductor. So she continued preparing the chorus, but Paul would come down for the last few rehearsals and performances from Washington. They began their work with the Oratory Society very successfully for the next 8 or 10 years, up until the time that Paul Hill died. At that point, then, the board asked me to come back to the Oratory Society and conduct them for another period of years. I came back in 1993.
Don was different in his nature and approach, I think, at that second time. And I think that sort of exemplified both growth on his part and maybe both mellowing and understanding of people, but I think he still had lots to contribute.
So there was a period then of, what was it, nearly 10 years, 8 or 10 years, in which I was directing. And another amusing moment was in the very beginning of the performance of Rossini's Stabat Mater, in which, just as we had started to play, the lights in Capitol Hall all went out. And for the next few seconds, the orchestra continued to play in the black without seeing any of the notes. And then, I suppose after 5 seconds, the lights came back on again and the performance went on as if nothing had changed. And then there was the moments in the performance of the St. Matthew Passion, in which the members of the orchestra as well as the soloists were so much a part of what was going on. And an interesting thing about the St. Matthew Passion is that there are a number of pieces, arias especially, which are essentially chamber music, involving just 2 or 3 instruments with continuo and a soloist. And I remember some of those moments were so beautifully done that I didn't have to do anything. I simply stopped conducting and let the instrumentalists and the singer do their thing. And these were wonderful moments in the performances of that. So at the end of my tenure, and then when Thomas Vining was appointed director, the Oratory Society also was able to move into the Municipal Arts Center, and that was an excellent site for rehearsals.
My own memory of probably of all the pieces of music that I sang, I remember the Vaughan Williams Sea Symphony, and we performed that at Dickinson under Lance Vining. Walt Whitman text, beautiful piece of music. But that was obviously only one of many, many wonderful performances.
When I retired in '98, I was no longer then conductor of the University Singers. And there were a number of other conductors that came along after that as conductor of the University Singers, and then came the appointment of Michael Sloan to the faculty at the university and as director of the University Singers. And we quickly saw what an outstanding conductor he was. So when it came time for considering a new director for the Oratory Society, he auditioned a couple of times and seemed to have some reluctance to me, at least in my view, had some reluctance about what he would do and whether he should take it on or not. And I remember having said to him, Michael, you have to. I don't know whether I was officially a member of the board after that or whether I was simply an adjunct. But I've always maintained my connection so that during the entire tenure of Vining and now with Michael, I still am an emeritus member of the board and keep coming because I don't, it's close to me. The Oratory Society means a lot to me, and I want to see it thrive.
Michael combines, a thorough understanding of the music with facility with all the music, and a thorough understanding of vocal production and what people need to do vocally and what he needs to do to get them to do it, to be able to produce it. But that with a full understanding of all the orchestral work. I think Michael probably combines the whole package as well as anyone ever has. And he's certainly an engaging person in the whole. Sometimes I'm a little amazed at how he stays being nice to us all the time.
Anything that combines opera and oratorio and the ballet, if you wish, and the symphony orchestra with, all of these things make the Oratory Society a fixture, so to speak, that explores these outreaches.
I think the addition to our performance repertoire of concert performances of operas and musical theater is a positive addition. It gives the singers a very different sense of what's going on if it's really brought home to you that you're a personage, even if it's a group personage within that overall drama. Plus, it enables us to do other works that music lovers really enjoy and really go for, opera, in particular.
But it is important that the Oratory Society continues to recognize its principal responsibility, which is the performance of major choral works. And I think that we're getting back to that. The problems that we have kept us from that is the fact that doing a major work is so expensive, because an orchestra of 40 people is a major expense. And having great soloists, having 4 or 5 of them, all of this means that you've got to have the funds to do it. And I hope that our supporters will realize really how important that is and will continue to flood the gates with dollars so that the society can thrive.